When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comms YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about Alicent and her character in episode 8. I talked about this in stream on my review for episode 8, but I don't really like the way they went with her character. She was a character that, after episode 7, I felt like really embraced the darker side of her character and was kind of being set up as the villain. If you really look at the way they portrayed her character, she's kind of the aggressor one. She basically assaults Rhaenyra. She like cuts her. She loses kind of her cool and stuff like that. And we've also seen in past episodes, she's pretty much said, no, we're not making peace. Like, I will not marry your children, or my children will not marry your children. You guys get it. And I want to talk about in this episode, why did they kind of reverse that, right? Where they kind of decided, hey, let's try to make Alicent more likable again and try to make her and Rhaenyra friendly again. So this video is going to be kind of discussing Alicent and Rhaenyra's relationship as a whole and why I wasn't a fan of the way it was done in this episode, and also Alicent just as a whole as a character. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, reach, or people that might like this content as well. And let's get into the rest of the video. So, Alicent and Rhaenyra are two characters that used to be very close, and we kind of see how that plays out, right? Where Alicent is a very different character. She's very proud. She's trying to be very follows the rule type character, kind of like Sansa in a way. And I've made this reference a lot. And then Rhaenyra is kind of like the rule breaker, doesn't fit into the normal societal like rules of women. She's very much the anti Alicent in many regards, right? And it's something that I think Alicent has come to be jealous of because of how much freedom Rhaenyra kind of has, right? If we look at Rhaenyra getting to choose her partner until she doesn't choose anyone and then kind of gets chosen for her. The way she's kind of able to be a dragon rider, how she's able to do things other than birthing and just being, you know, this wife that can be disregarded. We see that Alicent is very resentful and jealous of that early on in the episodes. And the relationship kind of finally deteriorates once Rhaenyra kind of lies to Alicent about, you know, sleeping with Kristen. And this is kind of where their relationship breaks off for good. So the last couple episodes have been kind of showing us what the relationship is boiled down to. We see Alicent kind of at really every turn being disrespectful to Rhaenyra. We kind of know why, but at the same time, it does seem kind of cruel. Like publicly in front of Laenor, just saying, oh yeah, this is not your child and stuff like that. And, you know, making Rhaenyra come to them right after giving birth. And we see that this growing conflict has gotten kind of to the point where even Rhaenyra sees that, you know, and she needs to make a peace because there's going to be a conflict after Viserys dies. She tries to marry her children to Alicent's children. Alicent flat out rejects just based upon the fact that they're bastards, which again wouldn't matter in this scenario because it's all about public perception. And it's the easiest way for Alicent's kids to also come into the throne without any bloodshed, but she flat out turns it down because she's breaking the rules. So Alicent is a character that's very interesting to study because when you look at the way each episode was going, they were slowly adding more and more and more to the villain side of Alicent, right? So Alicent was, you know, involved in the Strongs being killed. She wasn't like she basically implied that it'd be better if they would be gone, and so the Clubfoot did it, and then she knows the Clubfoot did it and hasn't said anything. So she's been complicit in the murder of two very important people in the story, right? So she's already dabbled in murder, right? And lying is another interesting part because that's something she's, you know, said is, you know, bad with Rhaenyra, but she's done the same thing. If you look at her manipulating Viserys to become like the wife or whatever for him, and how she never told Rhaenyra or anything like that, and Rhaenyra kind of felt betrayed. So as I'm trying to say is this friendship between the two has been very toxic. Both of them have been terrible friends to each other for the most part, and there really shouldn't be any type of reconciliation when we've been to this point so far. And it kind of comes to a climax in episode 7 where Alicent basically assaults and or tries to kill Rhaenyra while I guess trying to get Rhaenyra's son get his eye out to go, I guess, an eye for an eye, but Rhaenyra steps in. And this is a very weird point because a lot of people have brought up that Alicent feels very sorry and regretful for her actions in the next scene with her and Otto. And this is where I want to counter. I rewatched the scene just to clarify and just to get my mind back on what the scene actually entails. And Alicent at no point in this scene feels any sort of like sorry or regretful for hurting Rhaenyra or being against Rhaenyra. Where she's regretful and where she is sorry is because of her own personal image, right? People are thinking she's gone mad and she lost her cool. It's all about everything that she says she's sorry for in that scene is pointed towards her own self-image. It's not about Rhaenyra or any of these other characters. Like I've said, that relationship is fractured, right? Otto is straight up telling her that we are going to basically, him and her are going to bring down Rhaenyra and all these other characters. And she just sits there and she's like, yeah. Like, at no point is there any, like, no or indecision, really. Like, and this is what I think bothers me, because this, to me, was where Alicent's character was headed on the trajectory, right? It made sense with what is going to happen in episode 9. That's the trajectory her character should have been on for the action she's going to commit. And now we get into episode 8. So episode 8 starts with her kind of being in control and kind of taking over, right? This could be kind of seen as like manipulating the throne, where she's basically in full power while Viserys is kind of bedridden. And the whole premise is there's this kind of succession plot with the Velaryons, and we eventually get to this dinner, right? And this is also after we've already seen Daemon and Rhaenyra and Alicent already get into a pretty decent-sized argument in this episode, right? So it kind of continues what we were seeing from last episode, but we get further in, and Alicent and Rhaenyra are pretty cordial with each other. Like, it goes pretty well to the, like, and it makes sense from one perspective of Rhaenyra is kind of feeling pretty desperate at this point, and she's feeling like there's a lot of pressure on her, and she really is trying to avoid a conflict, it feels like. That's just based upon scenes we get with Rhaenyra and Viserys, and kind of how her whole situation is right now, because if you look at Alicent is in the better position. She's completely taken over the capital. It is basically hers, right? And that's what the whole episode's been building on, right? And this idea that Rhaenyra would want to make peace with Alicent makes a lot of sense from her point of view. Because again, Rhaenyra is never the one that ended the friendship. That was Alicent, right? And Rhaenyra was never the one that has kind of committed all these bad actions, right? Rhaenyra at this point is definitely the protagonist. Her one bad thing was we're assuming was an innocent that was killed instead of Laenor. That is on her hands, which again, not great. But the thought there was, okay, get Laenor out of there with Carl. So it is a bad action, but we see why it was done a little bit. And yes, it does add morally gray stuff to her character. But there's so many other things that they've omitted from the show that would have helped build Rhaenyra as having more of an evil side, like Alicent, to be on the same level. But when you look at what Alicent has done, she's clearly the villain here. Rhaenyra's tried to make peace, and she even, when they do the toast, right? A lot of people are, memeing on the kind of dinner where there's like 6 different toasts. Rhaenyra is the first one to try to make peace with Alicent on the idea of, she's thankful for that Alicent is taking care of her father and, apologizes for things in the past. And this all makes sense from Rhaenyra's point of view. This makes sense from Rhaenyra. But if you switch it from Alicent, right? Alicent has already shown us that she doesn't want to be friends with this person anymore. Like, she's fully committed to Aegon being on the throne, right? Maybe there's a little indecision in there, but she's constantly training Aegon and trying to get him to be a better king or heir to the throne, she's been grooming him to be that role since he was a kid, like a little kid. This should not be when Alicent just flips to like, oh yeah, you're going to be a great queen, Rhaenyra, unless it would have been a lie, which is something what I thought they were doing with this whole plot was, oh, this is a lie, but no, because even when Viserys leaves the room, it's not a facade. Like, Alicent goes to Rhaenyra and says, you know, are you you should stay, you know, right? And Rhaenyra's like, yeah, you know, I'll drop the kids back off at home, I'll come back on Dragonback, and, you know, we'll resume our friendship. And this just doesn't make any sense from Alicent's point of view. You've been building her character a certain way now for a couple episodes. And then right before we're about to get to the big conflict where Alicent is going to have to make her most dark and evil choices, or morally gray choices, you decide to revert where her character trajectory was going to, oh yeah, she's trying to be more likable, trying to be nicer. But in the same episode, you have her like basically manipulating and or blackmailing a servant girl. You have her hitting her child, which again, he did some bad things, so I guess that one's okay. But it's just this obvious thing that she's trying to push Aegon as the king when he is not fit for it at all. Like, she's a terrible mother. Like, we don't see, like, Rhaenyra tries to be a good mother, I think, for the most part, in the scenes we see with her and, like, Jace and Luke. Alicent is the complete opposite of that. And for all of a sudden, the show to be like, hey, Alicent, let's make peace and have Rhaenyra be the queen. It goes against pretty much everything they've been building up towards to this point, and I don't think they did enough for there to be some sort of morally gray or indecisive nature within Alicent. And even inside the episode, my chat talks about this. I don't watch the inside the episode because I don't think the inside the episode really builds the episode for me. Because there's so many things that they do in the inside of the episode that isn't really shown on screen, or is not the way I interpreted how they showed it. So I don't bother with it, right? And they said that Alicent kind of has taken up the religion of the Seven to kind of cover up what she's maybe been doing, or to maybe give her some help her public image. And that's good and all, but you didn't show that. Like, that was never portrayed on screen outside of, oh, she has a prayer at the dinner, which again, they're Hightowers. So when I watched that scene, I just kind of took it as, yeah, they're the Hightowers. This makes complete sense. And it's also being used to contradict the Greens from the Blacks. How the Blacks are not of the Seven. They are, you know, old Valyrian stuff. So it never comes across like that. So when you bring out evidence that is supposed to be, I guess, inferred from the time skip with very little basis to go off that, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then this is, I think, the weirdest part about Alicent's character is when we see, again, this is going to be spoilers for the next episode on the trailer, and also a little bit of book knowledge. So if you don't want episode 9 to be spoiled at all, I would refrain from listening to this part. But Alicent is going to choose to make Aegon the king just based off of hearing Viserys, while he's drugged, by the way, and on his last leg dying, because Viserys has something about the prince that was promised prophecy that Alicent really doesn't know what he's talking about, but just assumes, yeah, he wants Aegon to be the king. This is an obvious, like, Alicent is wanting to hear what she wants to hear so she can make Aegon the king. But my thing is, like, if she switched that quickly, I don't understand the Rhaenyra and Alicent plot. Were they trying to say that Alicent was kind of lying? That she was kind of just trying to keep Rhaenyra as a friend until the time comes, and then she could decide from there? I don't understand, like, where that plot was going. Because you can't say Alicent had true intentions to be friends with Rhaenyra and stuff if as soon as the first opportunity comes up, she betrays that. And I just feel like it feels so much worse and unearned to have Alicent flip that switch, have Aegon be king. And I know that, again, people will quote that, yes, all these past events, and that is true. But why take a break in episode 8? Why don't you keep building that up? Like, have Alicent to be a clear antagonist, because you've already built her that way. You can't revert now. She's not morally gray, really. Like, she's more of a villain, like Daemon. Daemon's not really morally gray. He's a villain. If you look at his actions, killed his wife. He's actively kind of committed treason on several different attempts. He doesn't love his wife. There was a deleted scene that implied he was cheating on Lena. There's a number of things you can quote here. I mean, the first episode, he was possibly attacking innocent people, right? The problem here is it's like if you try to make Daemon a morally gray character now, it's like it just doesn't work. He's done too much villainous stuff here, so you might as well just play into he's a villain. And that's kind of how I look at Alicent, where she is just a character now that should have been a villain, but we've tried to make her morally gray to kind of even out the sides. When instead, what they could have done, which would have been a much more compelling story, is bring Rhaenyra down to Alicent's level. Don't try to meet somewhere in the middle. Just bring Rhaenyra down, right? For instance, me and chat talked about this as well. Vaemon's death is quite different in Fire and Blood. Vaemond, when he starts, talking about how they're bastards and that he should be the one that inherits the throne to Driftwood, what ends up happening is Rhaenyra doesn't really look for the throne's permission. She gets Daemon to go basically kidnap him, bring him back. She cuts off his head and feeds his body to her dragon. That is like, in the story, that is kind of the first quote-unquote Mad Queen moment for Rhaenyra, right? It's what really brings her down, and you're like, wow, she has a little bit of cruelty and evilness to her, just because this guy was saying things. Like, yes, they are treasonous things to say, but this also then leads to Viserys takes out 5 tongues from the cousins of Vaemond. So it's things like that, it's little things like that, that they've made Rhaenyra such a protagonist that someone like Alicent is going to suffer. And when you want to try to bring her back up, it's going to be nearly impossible to do that. When Rhaenyra really, outside of like one thing, has been the morally good on the high ground, right? Or another situation, right? Have her actually kill Laenor. Have her actually kill him. That would have been another way to even the scales if you want to go with everybody's morally gray. Because right now, that's just not true. Right now, Rhaenyra is clearly the protagonist. Aegon is kind of our... Like, there's a couple antagonists, in my opinion, in this story. You have an antagonist from Aegon, Alicent, Otto, Daemon. Those are kind of your main ones that I would say are your antagonists. Aemond, he just hasn't been developed yet as a villain yet. He just kind of looks very menacingly. More or less, he hasn't really done a whole lot that would make him an antagonist outside of just looking like an evil dude. But that's kind of the way it's kind of gone, right? So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about Alicent's character arc. I kind of wanted to talk about this in a video and give my complete thoughts, because I think this was definitely a missed opportunity from the show writers to do her character a bit better, and Rhaenyra do her character a bit better as well. But thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.